baby, here I go. Start the show, beat on my heart, now about to explode. I'm about to explode. Feel good, what I'm feeling.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Ignite Your True Self. I'm Ericka Sallee, your host for this conversation. And for those of you who are joining me for the very first time, let me take this opportunity to welcome you to the conversation. For those of you who are coming back to join me live or who will check out the replay, then I want to say thank you to you. But if you are here for the first time, let me just take a moment to introduce myself, just in case you are not familiar with who I am and what I do in the world. As a professional development facilitator and a personal coach, I help women and organizations to figure out what stands in the way of their success. And the best part is that I get to share strategies to help them then move beyond those barriers to figure out what their next best version looks like. And of course, that equates to your true self, which is in essence who you were meant to be personally, professionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, and in all of those spaces that you are finding joy and fulfillment along the journey. And so this conversation is one that I bring to you each and every week, streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And this is an opportunity to just give you little tidbits around what might some of those barriers be for you and how you can just get just that little spark to help you continue to move forward. Now, one of the things that I absolutely love to remind us of is that when we think about change and transformation and what we want to do in our lives, we sometimes get overwhelmed by it because it feels so big. But when we start to just break things down and just get little teeny nuggets to help us move to the next, which might not get us to the end of what it is we're trying to accomplish, but just taking one step to move to the next, to the next, to the next, then helps us to achieve levels of success. And so that's what these conversations are all about. And so first of all, before I get started, I just want to remind you that yes, in fact, this is Women's History Month, Women's History Month. And I just wanted to share a couple of nuggets about Women's History Month. So what I did not know was that, first of all, we started off with Women's History Day back in 1909. And then it moved to Women's History Week, which started in 1978. And then Women's History Month was birthed, let me say it this way, in 1987. I had no idea. And so when I think about Women's History Month and recognizing all of the amazing things that we as women contribute to society, to the world, to our families, our communities, our businesses, our clients, it is just amazing to me how powerful we really are. And so every year there is a theme. And this year's theme is celebrating women who tell their stories. Now, we all, every single one of us, excuse me, has a story to tell, has multiple stories. In fact, I do believe that it is through the richness of our stories that we find our voices, that we are able to make an impact and leave a footprint and an imprint on each and every aspect of life in general. You know, women are powerful with voices when it comes to voting. Women are powerful with voices when it comes to how we raise our families, how we impact our families. Women's voices are powerful in the marketplace and how we spend our dollars. Women's voices are powerful to make change. There's so many things going on around right now that when we step back and recognize the collective power of who we are as women, regardless of where we come from, what we look like, who we're married to, it really does make a difference when we start thinking about what that really means and how it impacts each and everything that is happening all around us. And so I know I'm taking a little bit of extra time to emphasize this before we get into the topic for tonight. But I think that it's so very important to remember that we have the power as women. Now, this doesn't take away anything from the men, because we do need men in our community to help us to get goals accomplished and to also make a difference and an impact. But when it comes to women, oh, there's something special and amazing about who we are and what we bring into the world. Talk about ignite your true self. So I want to let that sit for just a moment, like resonate, let that resonate with you, and think about the collective and individual power that we do have in order to make a difference. And so I could probably spend the entire conversation on just that topic alone, but we do have a topic for tonight's conversation. Before I share the topic for tonight, I do want to remind you that as you are watching this, as you either watch it live or you come back to see it later, I do want you to use the hashtag that is floating across your screen right now, and that is Ignite Your True Self. That's TRU, no E, TRUSELF, Ignite Your True Self, because I want you to share with people where you're hanging out at, what information you're getting, and where it's coming from. So use the hashtag Ignite Your True Self. So let's get into the topic for tonight. So the topic for tonight is, what am I done putting up with? Let's think about that for a minute. What am I done, or what I'm done putting up with, is the topic for tonight. And, I think that as I talk about this topic, because it's Women's History Month, I think that it is also a perfect time to tie this topic in. What I'm done putting up with, what I'm done putting up with. I just want to say that one more time, what I'm done putting up with. So when you think about this conversation tonight, I want you to just play that question over and over and over in your mind. Because here's the deal, we tolerate a lot. And oftentimes we tolerate things at the expense of our peace, of our joy, of our happiness. We tolerate things that then get in the way of what that true self looks like for us, because we are standing up for others. We're standing in the gap for others. We're allowing others to project their thing onto us. And so we just say, I'm going to let it slide. I'm just going to go with the flow. I'm not going to say anything. And so this may sound very familiar to you. Maybe one of the things that you're tolerating is disrespect. I'm being disrespected, whether it's the way that someone talks to you, whether it's the way someone doesn't talk to you. Perhaps you feel like you're being ignored, that you're not being valued. Maybe that's something that you're tolerating. You may also be tolerating, and this sounds like something really simple, and I gotta say that I've been guilty of this myself, so someone else has had to put up with this from me. Cutting people off in the middle of a sentence. I was having a conversation with my daughter a couple weeks ago, and she was telling me a story. And as she's telling me the story, I jumped in and I said, oh, what was that? And so I could hear her, and we laugh about it now, but it's funny. It's funny, and it also helps me. So I could, as I asked the question, her response was, oh. And she laughed and she said, I'm getting to it. I'm getting ready to tell you. But even though that was a lighthearted conversation, what it said to me when I heard her say, it said to me, you are not allowing her to finish. And so now, even though we laugh about it, it's a reminder to me that, okay, so sometimes we put up with people doing that. Now, it was a fun little banter between the two of us, but sometimes in a different situation, it can be something that feels a little bit different. So when we think about this question or this topic, what I'm not going to put up with is this little tickle in my throat. So that's why I have some water. So let's see if I can get this together. So I'm gonna go on mute for just a second, just to see if I can get a really good clear of the throat. I'm back. So hopefully that helps. That's what happens with live, but you just go with the flow. So anyway, so here's one of the first topics to think about, and one of the first tips, I should say, is that when you ask yourself, what I'm done putting up with, here's the first thing to then go into, or the second question, I guess, is to ask yourself what emotion you experience from the thing that you're putting up with. Okay. So I remember some time ago, I was in a meeting, and I was listening to a colleague who was sharing some information. And as the colleague was sharing the information, I then followed up and said, so let me clarify to make sure I understand. And I proceeded to, no, that's not the way it went. Let me say it the right way. I made a statement, right? And he came back. I made a statement to clarify part of the discussion that we were engaging in at the time. And so he came back and said, no, that's not it. It is. And he literally went back and repeated just about everything that I said in the conversation. And so there was a time when, in that scenario, I would have just let it go, not said anything, and just kind of let the conversation continue on. But in that moment, when he finished, I said, well, that's exactly what I just stated. So it sounds like we're saying the same thing. So in that example, what I realized is that the emotion that I was experiencing in that situation was one of frustration, really. And it almost made me feel like, not that the person was intentionally doing this, but it kind of made me feel like, no, you're not smart enough to say that, or no, let me be the one who's right. Okay. And that was frustrating. The reason why it was frustrating is because in the past, like way back when, I've had experiences where I've been afraid to use my voice in certain situations because I'm like, if I say this and it's wrong, then, what are they going to think? So this was an opportunity for me to shift out of that old space that I've been in so many times before. So I had to say, what emotion am I experiencing in this moment? Because what it helped me to recognize is that because I was frustrated in the moment, because I felt like, are you trying to make me look like I'm not smart enough? Like, what's happening here in this dynamic? Then that let me know that I could not put up with him coming back to say, no, that's not right. But you literally restated what I said. So I decided that I wasn't going to allow that situation to just fester and not go unaddressed. Okay. So because I was frustrated, because I felt like, this is making me feel like I'm not smart enough, then let me just address it in the moment, so that the next time it's not something that I would have to put up with again. Okay. So when you say to yourself, what is it that I'm no longer going to put up with? The first part of it is, when I start thinking about the emotion or the feeling or the thought that I'm experiencing in this moment during the thing that I'm putting up with, then it helps me to recognize that if it's a feeling that is uncomfortable or something that just feels like it's not good energy, then that's reason enough to say, this is a sign that I shouldn't put up with this. This is a sign that I shouldn't let this go unchecked. This is a sign that I shouldn't just ignore it and just hope that it'll go away. Okay. So that's the first thing, to ask what emotion you're experiencing, because it's in that asking yourself what you're feeling, what you're thinking, is a trigger to say, now, should I continue to put up with this or should I address it? And in the example that I just gave, I decided to address it because I knew in that moment how I was feeling. I also recognized that it wasn't just me and the other colleague in this space. It was other people who I'm sure had to hear the same thing. That's just how clear it was that, oh, you literally just restated everything that I just said, but you said that I was wrong. So I'm sure everybody else could hear that. And so it was also an opportunity for me to stand up for myself and let other people know that that's what was happening. Okay. So that emotion was really driving the decision for me to address. Okay. So hopefully you followed along with that point. So let's get to the second point. The second point is that when you make the decision not to put up with and whatever that thing is for you, you can fill in the blank. So when you say, okay, I'm no longer going to put up with this thing, be sure to tie that decision not to put up with that thing to that emotion. Okay, I want to say that again. Be sure to tie your decision not to put up with X, not to put up with disrespect, not to put up with, oh my gosh, this person cut me off, not to put up with, oh my goodness, this person may be intentionally or unintentionally trying to insult my intelligence. This person is trying to make me feel like I don't know what I'm talking about. Like whatever it is that you decide that you're no longer going to put up with, be sure to tie that decision to the emotion that you know you feel when that thing is happening. And here's the reason why. It's because it becomes more about the emotion that you're experiencing rather than the person or the situation, okay? So let me go back to my example. So sitting in a meeting, having this dialogue going on, I knew that I couldn't tie, let me say it the right way. I knew that it was best for me not to tie my not putting up with to the person, because then I would have lashed out at the person. Okay. Lashing out at the person would not have made the dialogue go any better, would not have made the situation productive, would not have allowed me to get my point across with a level of integrity, respect, and professionalism. So sometimes when we're putting up with something or someone, we tend to only make it about the other person or just about the situation. But when we tie it to the emotion that we're feeling, the impact that the thing that we're putting up with has on us, then it causes us to then look inward and say, okay, if I'm putting up with this person or this situation or this circumstance, then what is it on the inside of me that I need to then attach a different decision to? You understand what I'm saying? So at the end of the day, it's not that we should not take other people into consideration. Because here's the thing. Here's what I recognize is that sometimes, and I'm going to use people as an example, and you can kind of figure out what that looks like for you. But a lot of times when we tolerate things from other people that don't feel good to us, we are observing or taking in something that the other person needs to fulfill. Okay. I'm going to say that again. I hope I might not say it exactly the same words in the same order, but when we are putting up with something from someone else, oftentimes that person is demonstrating something that needs to be fulfilled within them, or something that's lacking, or something that they feel insecure about, and they're projecting it onto us. So when we put up with that, then we are kind of opening up the space to take in that person's baggage and all the things. And so then we kind of shrink ourselves down and we continue to tolerate that. So it's not that we should not recognize that that may be the case, but when we go inward and we say, okay, I know this person might have had to restate what I said and make it seem like it was his thought because maybe his ego is getting in the way. It's not that I shouldn't recognize that, but if I solely focus on that and I don't tie my decision not to tolerate that behavior to what it makes me feel like, then I'm really not looking for the opportunity to grow in the space that I need to in order to say, you know what, I'm not going to tolerate that anymore. Okay. So there's a lot of meat in there to unpack, but hopefully at the highest level in the time that we have for tonight's show that you get that part. Okay. So good evening. Good evening. It's always good to see you on live with me, Jaquista. I appreciate you and I thank you so much. And here's what I'm going to ask you to do since you are here with me, and anyone else who comes into the conversation live, just go ahead and use the hashtag Ignite Your True Self so that you can let folks know where you are hanging out, what you're up to on this Thursday. Okay. All right. Good to see you. And thank you for being with me tonight. So here is the third tip that I want to share with you. So, and I'm going to go back and recap as we are about to wrap up in just a few moments. But here's the third thing. So when you think about what you are no longer going to tolerate, what you're no longer going to put up with, here's one of the things that I think is so very important to this topic, and that is not to feel obligated to explain your decision. Don't feel obligated to have to tell someone, well, you know, I've decided that I'm not going to put up with this anymore. I've decided, oh, by the way, it's going back to my example, to my colleague in the situation, excuse me, do you mind if I jump in and say something? Just feeling like you gotta try to validate the fact that you're making this decision that I'm no longer going to tolerate. You don't have to explain it in a way that suggests you're asking for permission. Instead, it could be something as simple as, you know, I realize that there are moments when I may need to speak up and to share my opinion, to give my my perspective. And so I'm going to freely do that. I'm going to do it in a respectful way. I'm going to treat others with professionalism and dignity. But you know, that's kind of where things are. So you're saying it in a way that suggests it is a powerful place for you to be when you decide, you know, I'm no longer going to put up with this. Without even having to say the word or, and here's the other thing. Sometimes when we feel like we have to explain our decision about why we're not putting up with certain things, we might get a little defensive. And sometimes it can cause us to be in a friction kind of space. It could cause us to be in a space where the energy is just not right. And it just makes us feel some kind of way. So when you decide, you know, I'm no longer going to do this or to put up with this or to tolerate, you can just simply just do it without even having to explain. And at some point, people will begin to get it or they won't. And in either case, it's okay. You don't have to explain that either. So it's really just a matter of you standing up for yourself in a more powerful, direct way that helps protect you against your energy being used in a way that doesn't suit you well. Okay. Thank you so much for the hashtag. I tell you, you are like, the number one viewer, right? I don't even know. I was trying to figure out what I wanted to say, but so there's so much in this conversation. So let me take a moment to just go back and recap. Again, the conversation is all around what I'm done putting up with. I am done allowing people to walk all over top of me. I am done allowing myself to sit in spaces, knowing that I bring value, knowing that I have something to say, knowing that I'm worthy enough. I am done sitting in spaces and being silent. I'm done putting up with my own fear about who I am and what I bring to the world, right? So it may not even be about someone else or another situation. It might be you shrinking back on yourself. I'm done thinking that I'm not good enough. I'm done thinking that I'm not smart enough. I'm done thinking that I'm not beautiful enough. I'm done with those old ways of thinking. I am done, finished, kaput, over. Right? And so again, let's recap really quickly. Tip number 1 was to ask what emotion you're experiencing from the thing that you're putting up with. Let me go back. I use my personal example about it being connected with another person. Well, let's just say you're done putting up with something that's on the inside of you. If you say to yourself, okay, every single time I start thinking about going after that dream or that goal, I say to myself, ooh, but maybe this isn't the right time, or maybe I'm not good enough, or maybe, there's too much going on and people are already doing it. Like when you start thinking about that, then what emotion is tied to that? Because every time you talk yourself out of the thing in that moment, you might wake up tomorrow and feel miserable and feel like, man, I really wish I could do. So the emotion is a dissatisfaction. So you might say, I'm done, I'm tired, I'm finished tolerating my own BS when it comes to things that I want to do, and I'm talking myself out of doing it. So ask yourself, what emotion is showing up for you? And if you're still frustrated and you're still angry and you're still not happy and you're still feeling like I'm doing this and I'm going through the day-to-day emotions, but I'm not feeling fulfilled and purposeful, then tie that thing to, okay, now that I know how I feel about me putting up with my own shrinking back, then I can go to tip number 2, is to tie that decision to say, I'm no longer going to shrink back because it just doesn't feel good. I don't like when I get up in the morning and I look in the mirror and I'm beating myself up over and over and over. So I'm putting up with my own inability to see my beauty and my value. That's just an example. Now, if that pertains to you, then that's perfect, because then hopefully this can just ignite that little bit of fire to say, okay, I'm done putting up with me. I'm done putting up with me. I'm done putting up with the excuses that I make for myself. I'm done putting up with thinking about it, writing about it, praying about it, and I'm not being about it. Okay, that's just an example. All right, so tie your decision not to tolerate putting up with yourself to how you're feeling every time you do that. Okay, all right, and then number 3, the third tip is don't feel obligated to explain your decision. All right. And I'm going to use the example that I just gave you. Like if you're done putting up with how you're shrinking back on yourself, when you start showing up differently, and maybe your friends and your family don't recognize that part of you, and they're like, oh, wait a minute, you're spending a lot of time going to this class, signing up for this workshop, investing in this, doing that. Like, why are you doing that? Like, what do you think you're going to get out of it? Some people might say that to you. You don't have to explain to people, you know what? I decided that I'm no longer going to shrink back on myself. I'm going to step out and do. You don't have to tell people that. But what you might have to recognize is how those relationships need to shift, because maybe people don't understand why you're done putting up with making excuses for you. Okay. So there's a whole lot in that. I hope that you got everything that you needed in this moment to say, I'm going to take this and just go a little bit further. Going to take these nuggets. Maybe all 3 of these things pertain to you. Maybe all 3 of them resonate with you. Maybe one of them resonates with you and you're like, ooh, that's the one that I'm going to really gravitate toward. All right. So let me share this. I want to go back and say this really quickly as I begin to wrap up the conversation. When you think about these 3 things that I just shared, when you think about this entire conversation, the reason why this is important to connect to your true self is that when we begin to stop putting up with things that don't serve us, then it helps us to then be open. And this is really the case with all of these conversations, like each and every week. The main thing that I want you to walk away from is why these things are important. And they're important because when you start moving some of this stuff out of the way, then it opens up space. It opens up opportunity. It opens up the thought process. It opens up the mental, the emotional space and capacity for you to say, okay, if I can move this out of the way, then yes, it's going to get me that much closer to what my true self looks like. It's the person that's fulfilled. It's the person that's connected to something that's meaningful and purposeful. It's the person who is standing in a space to leave their footprint and their fingerprint on the world that they get to touch. Okay, so that's the reason why these conversations are important. So as I wrap up, I'm going to mention two other things, and then I'm going to let you get on with your evening. Number one is that when you think about this conversation tonight, you know, what I'm done putting up with, sometimes as women, we tolerate things and we kind of dim our light and we hide behind all the stuff we're putting up with, whether it's people, whether it's ourselves, circumstances, whatever the case may be. I do believe that each person, each woman, especially this is Women's History Month, there is something on the inside of us that is ready to connect with the world. But sometimes when we are tolerating and putting up with other things, then we're shrinking back and we're not being as powerful as we could possibly be. So I'm going to invite you to consider joining me for the Bold Brilliant Boss Leaders Information Night. This is a program that I offer for women in leadership. And sometimes we are sitting in spaces and we're carrying responsibilities, titles, and all the things, but we're afraid to stand in that space and own it. Now, you might say, okay, well, what does leader mean? The reality of it is every woman is a leader. So you might be a CEO, you might be a senior vice president, you might be a director, a supervisor, a manager, you might be overseeing something, a board, a community project, or something really major for your family. Whatever that looks like, recognize that owning that space brings a lot of power and has the ability to bring major transformation. But if we don't stand in it in a bold way, if we don't use the brilliance that we have been given through education, our experience, our history, whatever, then we can't be the bosses that we are required to be in whatever space we occupy. So I want you to consider registering for one of the two information sessions that I will be hosting. The first one is March the 21st from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The second is on March the 22nd from 12 to 1 p.m. So whichever one of those times works best for you, it'll be the opportunity for me to share information about the program, and then you get to decide, okay? Whether or not you are ready to embrace your bold, brilliant bossness, okay? So again, register for one of the two information sessions, March the 21st or March the 22nd. I will post the registration links after this is over, and you can go ahead and secure your spot for one of those two. It's the same session, just being offered two different dates, two different times to open up more flexibility for your schedule. So now let me move on to the final part of the conversation, and that is to share with you what the topic is for next week. So next week, we're going to be talking about 3 important things that you can learn from failure. Now, you notice that failure is in quotes. We'll talk a little bit more about that on next week. So I'm going to encourage you to join me for that conversation and invite a friend to be a part of the conversation with us. Okay. So now, if you have any questions about anything else that you heard tonight and you say, I hear it, I know, I heard the tips and I know all the things, and so I want to know how this actually relates to me specifically, then you can reach out to me at trusynergy.org. You can also check out all of my social media connections on my Linktree, which is Linktree TruSynergy _. If you happen to be watching this on my YouTube channel, then I do want you to subscribe to the channel, share it out, and then turn the notification bell on so that you know when new videos are uploaded. You can find me on Facebook and LinkedIn at Ericka Sallee, and you can also find me on Instagram at TruSynergy_. All of those are also available on my website, trusynergy.org, and on my Linktree. So on that note, I want to thank you for joining me for this live conversation. Please feel free to continue the conversation. Drop your comments, anything that resonated with you throughout the conversation. Please feel free to share that in the comments on whichever platform you happen to be seeing this. And I look forward to seeing you all again soon. So until I do, I want you to take care of yourselves and, yes, be well.